240 miles southwest of Moresby Island, off the coast of British Columbia. A Chinese Type 093B nuclear-powered attack submarine ran deep and silent on a southerly course through the cold waters of the eastern Pacific. The submarine was silent, but not silent enough. Stalking her 6,000 yards off her starboard quarter was the USS Vermont, a Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarine led by U.S. Navy Commander Robert Hoff. For the past 12 days, Hoff and his crew had painstakingly tracked the Chinese submarine, which weeks earlier had been detected passing through the Miyako Strait, and then trailed by the USS North Carolina before being handed off to the USS Vermont, southeast of Kodiak Island in the Gulf of Alaska. Among the 77 total subs known in the PLA Navy, the Type 093B, of which there were 10, was modern, formidable and deadly, capable of launching long-range cruise and hypersonic missiles against ships or high-value land targets. Commander Hoff was deeply unsettled by the Chinese submarine's track down the western coast of North America, putting it now well within range of critical targets, from Naval Base Kitsap to Silicon Valley, down to the Vandenberg Space Force Base. The sub's location was all the more alarming as Hoff was updated about the worsening situation in Taiwan, including the sinking of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer off the port of Kaohsiung. But for the moment, his orders remained to be at weapons tight. At 19:30 Zulu time, those orders abruptly changed. The USS Vermont received a sudden flash message. It read in part, "Chinese forces have escalated to theater-level attacks. Multiple salvos of mixed-raid missile attacks have struck multiple bases throughout the region. At least one strike on carrier strike group in Philippine Sea. Sank 2 destroyers. USS George Washington is disabled at least and may be mission killed. Casualties estimated at 5,000 plus based on early reports. All US forces have been ordered to obtain DEFCON 2. All units set posture. Red Tight 1. Engage and destroy any subsurface target positively identified as PLAN. On the Joint Integrated Prioritized Target List Option Bravo, Type 093B, and any other positive ID contact inside the weapon engagement zone of Blue Force surface units are the priority. Be prepared to commence to Phase 2 sea operations within 96 hours. The message drained away the last bit of hope by Commander Hoff that a conflict could be avoided. The United States was now at war with China. With his orders given, Commander Hoff first ordered maneuvers to determine whether his own submarine was being tracked. Satisfied that the area was clear, he then ordered the boat to close the distance to their target, to best ensure a kill. The Chinese sub continued on course, unaware of the approaching danger. Hoff ordered the crew to battle stations, torpedo. Unlike the movies of old where the launch of a torpedo was announced with a loud rush of compressed air, the 2 Mk-48 torpedoes left the Vermont in near silence, the weapons swimming out under their own power and guided by thin fiber-optic cables. There were no pings of an active sonar, nothing to announce their presence as they sprinted the last 1,000 yards to their target at nearly 65 miles per hour. Only in the final seconds did the Chinese sub begin a hard turn to port and deploy countermeasures, but it was far too late. Hoff and his crew soon heard 2 muffled rumbles like that of distant thunder. Then, sonar contact with the Chinese sub was lost as it, and its crew of 103 plummeted to the ocean floor. There was no celebration aboard the USS Vermont, only sober realization of the new world they now inhabited. Commander Hoff would later write in his journal, dryly reflecting on the dangerous and daunting tasks ahead, quote, "1 down, 76 to go." At the Joint Operations Command Center outside Nanjing, General Li Busheng reviewed battle damage assessments from the initial missile strikes, gathered from multiple intelligence sources, including those satellites that remained, at least for the moment, unmolested by the United States. The reports were both encouraging and disappointing. Taiwan, for the most part, was successfully suppressed, with nearly all capital Taiwanese surface ships sunk or disabled, scores of aircraft destroyed, and airfields rendered inoperative for some time to come. Power and communications to most of the island were cut, its command and control facilities flattened, and air defenses severely degraded. China now owned the skies over Taiwan. As for the decapitation strikes on Taiwanese leadership, however, the results were as yet undetermined. That aside, General Li was very encouraged to learn that the Americans' aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington, had been struck and was burning, the final real-world test of whether or not the PLA rocket force could deliver the results, as was sold to Li, Lu Hao, and the PRC. But there was disappointment in the opening strike as well. The entry of the Philippines into the war on the side of Taiwan, though certainly not unplanned for, was an added complexity that he'd hoped to avoid. Additionally, General Li was deeply skeptical of reports that the US's mobile missile batteries had been largely damaged or destroyed. Time would brutally tell whether that was true or not. His deepest disappointment and concern, however, fell to Guam and Japan. At Guam, intelligence indicated that the US airfield had effectively been put out of action, with several aircraft destroyed on the ground. But from the images, the damage looked far less than Li had hoped. Clearly, only a very small percentage of missiles had penetrated the US's formidable air defense system. And though his advisors assessed that Guam would be inoperative for weeks, General Li believed the truer time frame was mere days. But it was the BDA report about Japan that worried him the most. The US's primary airfields and naval bases had been effectively damaged, along with several civilian airports used by the Americans for temporary staging. Yet intelligence showed that not nearly enough aircraft had been caught and destroyed on the ground as was initially expected. The Americans had well distributed their air assets across the country. For General Li, what it came down to was a simple numbers game. To properly disable an airfield required allocating 50 missiles, with half reaching their target. But the daunting fact was that there were 93 airfields across Japan with runways capable of operating military aircraft. He simply couldn't hit them all, which meant that US air power, if dazed in the moment, was still a very capable and dangerous force that threatened his immediate plans. For that reason, General Li urged President Lu Hao that more time was needed before sending the invasion fleet. In his assessment, 36 additional hours of air and missile strikes would more effectively blanket the airfields and keep the Americans disoriented and on the defensive. Ultimately, President Lu Hao rejected Li's request for more time. "Every hour we wait," said Lu, "is another hour the Americans put more forces in theater." General Li gently countered that his original timeline, one that had already been accelerated because of the convoy battle off Kaohsiung, would now be accelerated again, leaving him with fewer ships in position, fewer decoys, and fewer logistics optimally staged for a sustained fight. But Lu Hao was undeterred. The crossing would begin now. Meanwhile, in the skies over the East China Sea, US and Japanese fighter aircraft fought what one airman called, quote, "a near impossible game of whack-a-mole," as aircraft were vectored to defend against near-constant incoming threats. The cycle of attacks included fast-moving ballistic and hypersonic missiles, fighter and bomber aircraft, the lower and slower cruise missiles, and the even harder to detect low-flying suicide drones, before the entire cycle began anew. Leading a four-ship flight of F-15s, Pilot Major Ian Fiebig and Weapons Systems Officer Captain Diego Bonaparte were already near exhaustion, having flown to Japan from the United States less than 24 hours earlier. What they faced was daunting beyond the mere aerial threats. Though their aircraft had survived the initial missile blitz by establishing operations at a civilian airfield, the distribution of aircraft made for a logistics nightmare. Getting fuel, parts, personnel, systems and ordnance out to the right places at the right time, all at unprecedented scale while under fire, severely slowed sortie rates in the opening hours of the war. More than once, Major Fiebig, his aircraft depleted of missiles, was forced to switch to guns to down incoming drones, a maneuver that was difficult in the best of circumstances and downright dangerous at night over water. As they flew back to refuel and rearm, Captain Bonaparte watched as high overhead, US interceptors struck their ballistic targets, raining down millions of bits of metallic debris, a hazard that would have grounded or diverted his flight in peacetime. While over the radio, he and Major Fiebig were told that they would have to wait to approach for landing. Their airfield was expecting an imminent missile attack, and crews were sprinting for their bunkers. Captain Bonaparte later commented, quote, "The waiting and not knowing their fate was the worst moment of that entire first day." A half a world away in the White House Situation Room, President Dalman and the National Security Council were in a state of, as one unnamed official described it, a doom loop of distress, confusion, and fury. Making matters worse was the lack of information. As yet, there had been no contact established with the president of Taiwan, or knowledge of whether or not he was still alive. Reports of the extent of damage to US bases and their operational status were also often uncertain or conflicted. But it was the definitive report of the decimation of Carrier Strike Group 5, including the loss of the GW, that stunned the room to silence. Secretary of Defense Bruce Lager would later say, "We've wargamed this 1,000 times and knew we might well lose a carrier, but there's no preparing yourself for the enormity of it when it's real." Simultaneous to the news about the GW, US intelligence was now confident that a Chinese amphibious fleet tasked with invading Taiwan was underway. Where it was directed and where the landing would be was yet unclear. The island's difficult terrain offered few viable options. Allied war planners focused on three of the most likely locations. The most high-risk but high-reward location for China would be a landing near the heavily defended area around the port of Taipei, with a subsequent lightning push into the capital city. The second option was farther to the south, along a narrow stretch of beach near the southwestern city of Tainan. There, the PLA could succeed in severing the main north-south highways, cutting off southern Taiwanese forces as the PLA pushed north. But there was also substantial risk, as the landing site would create a two-front battle in the opening days of the attack, when the PLA invasion force was most vulnerable. Finally, there were the beaches south of the city of Kaohsiung. From there, the PLA could seize Taiwan's largest commercial shipping port, which could then be used to offload follow-on forces and supply. But the location would also force the PLA to fight a bloody and treacherous battle up the full length of the country in order to reach Taipei. Dalman asked how long before China would have boots on the beach. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs answered that it would take approximately 8 hours for the amphibious elements to come ashore, but that airborne units would surely be arriving much sooner, and were likely already in the air. Dalman looked to what US military options were available in the moment, but the sobering reality delivered by those on the council was that for the next few days, US air and naval assets across the Western Pacific were going to be mostly on the defensive, and that it would be a week or more before additional carrier strike groups, as well as air, ground, and other naval assets would be in place and effective to hit back. The answer was stark. For the next week, Taiwan was mostly on its own. Minutes later, an aide to the Director of National Intelligence entered the room. "It's Kaohsiung," he announced. The Chinese were headed south for a landing at Kaohsiung. Coming up in episode 22, China's D-Day has arrived, and the fate of Taiwan hangs in the balance. If you enjoy this series and would like to see it continue, you can send John, the guy who makes this possible, a few dollars through a YouTube thanks, or join the Flat Circle History Patreon site, where you'll get behind-the-scenes access, commercial-free episodes, member-only content, and if you join at the Joint Chiefs level, you might just get a character named after you in a future episode. You can also find us on Substack, where you can take a deeper dive into this continuing story, including access to scripts, research sources, scene locations, notes, and more. Lastly, a shout out to my subject matter experts for this episode, including Michael Hilliard of the Red Line podcast, Darth Rust, The War at Home, and a few others who shall remain anonymous. And as always, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And thanks for watching.